Yesterday, I was sitting there after I had my mentorship call with my community, and I was like, well, wow, each session that we record the audio, I can turn into a private podcast episode to make it easier for people to, get access to it, to play it on the go and everything like that. So I was like, man, that's what I'm going to do next.
That was Jonathan Jones having an aha moment for his subscriber podcast project he and I are building out here in public. If you didn't catch the first episode, I invite you to go back and listen to me pitch this crazy idea of giving him a free Castos account to monetize his podcast efforts in some way. Well, audio specifically, but what kind of audio? That was up to him. Here's Jonathan back in April thinking about this idea on the Audience podcast.
Somebody says, oh, you don't have it on audiobook? And then I can say, well, yes, I actually do. Share Castos link here. So being able to be in a position to differentiate or diversify opportunities for people to get more access or to get products or get services, that's what I'm most excited about. I just feel the biggest challenge initially will be some of the promotion, just taking time and coming up with creative ways too. But other than that, I'm not seeing any challenge. I'm seeing more benefits, and I've seen a lot more benefits as me and you talked about this concept and this idea. So I'm not really fearful, but I am grateful that you have as much experience as you do in the game. And just talking with you about this idea and you reaching out to me about the idea.
A little more than 1 month later, would he still be excited? I had the chance to catch up with Jonathan in part 2 of our little public experiment to see where his head was at. I'll be honest, I was a bit nervous for both of us. Was he still interested in pursuing this? I caught him bright and early, having just returned from 2 podcast events down south.
I was down in Orlando at PodFest, had the opportunity to speak. I spoke on the topic of 5 ways to establish credibility through having podcast guests. So that was super cool. And then 2 days later, I emceed the monetization track, got to meet the man, the myth, the legend, Dave Jackson. And then I hopped on a bird, and then I came to Atlanta and spoke at the Black Podcast Festival. And there I talked about what we've talked about before, how you can leverage your podcast, take your podcast to then secure paid speaking engagements. So it was fun. My body is still tired, and I'm excited. I'm just excited.
As somebody who is, well, I'll say now a veteran in podcasting, what did you learn from these events that you didn't know already going down to these podcast events?
Wow. So one, the opportunity to monetize at one point traditionally, right? People typically think, oh, sponsorship, oh, ad reads, and then they may dwindle down to products and services just after affiliates. But going to PodFest, Dave Jackson talked about setting your podcast up and configuring it to receive payment through Bitcoin. And then there's another gentleman down there, his name is Seth, and he talked about how you can how he's on a mission to create an NFT for his podcast to build community around his podcast. So there are just so many other ways that are being exposed and or revealed that I didn't necessarily know before. And I also learned the power of having one of those cards, like a business card with the barcode on the back of it. It makes it so much easier to connect with more people faster. If you're a podcaster and you go to a conference, if you don't connect with at least 5 to 10 or whatever number of people you set for yourself, you're shortchanging yourself at the highest level, because that goes to the monetization part, right? Because building community, building relationships, that helps you build trust. And then that helps people spend money with you when they know what you do. So that would be what I would say.
I'm curious is what was the vibe of these events? I mean, we're sort of hearing in the news that, well, I don't know, are we headed into a recession? It's inflation. Are people worried about launching a podcast these days? What was the general vibe you got around podcasting, especially if it's a core part of the business?
So the vibe down at PodFest, the majority of people already had podcasts. So the vibe was really looking to collaborate, strongly looking to collaborate, because just like you're saying about, are we going to be in a recession, or is this going to happen, or is that going to happen? It was just a strong urge to collaborate and to connect. down at Podfest for sure, and then down at the Black Podcast Festival in Atlanta. There, the vibe was it was like a family reunion, Matt. It was really it was pretty cool because it was like these are people. Some of them I've seen here and there on Twitter and stuff like that, but also just the opportunity to really hear people's stories, because that was a part that, I mean, we can get it online, but it's a different feel when I'm looking at you in your face and I shake your hand and you're telling me why you're passionate about your podcast that's helping people change their eating habits or tighten up their finances. So that would be what I would say was the two vibes of the two conferences.
Now that we were able to catch up and the caffeine finally set in for Jonathan, I needed to know where he was at with our Build in Public project. After we recorded that first time, were you like, what did I get myself into? Like, did you start thinking like, oh my God, what did I say yes to? What was your reaction to after our first recording?
So after the first recording, I mean, I was really fired up. I was really fired up, really excited about the idea. Because like I told you before, I've heard of the private podcast, but I didn't really see anybody doing a private podcast. So since the recording, me going under the hood, getting the opportunity to record, getting the opportunity to, channel this other lane of monetization, in addition to also now realizing that the opportunity is so great. Because Matt, on one side, and I'm like 3/4 of the way through this audiobook now. I'm 3/4 of the way through recording this audiobook. But yesterday I was sitting there after I had my mentorship call with my community, and I was like, well, wow, each session that we record the audio, I can turn into a private podcast episode to make it easier for people to, get access to it, to play it on the go and everything like that. So I was like, man, that's what I'm going to do next. So after I get this audiobook up, and I'm like, this just makes sense. So you have my mind going. And now that you brought me into the fold of this understanding, now I'm trying to also think of other ways that this can be leveraged as well.
Remind the audience, you have the printed book. What's the title of the book again? What's the subject? And now you're turning it into an audiobook.
It's called Get Paid with Podcasting, and it's basically the blueprint showing how to start a podcast, walking you through, literally hand-holding, walking you through all the way to where you can then get how you can monetize the podcast. So talking about multiple different ways that you can monetize, and then also even break down, how people can be in a position to where they can start doing like guesting tours and stuff like that.
You can imagine my relief. Jonathan is really hyped to turn this printed book into a sellable audiobook using his Castos account. I also had a smile from ear to ear when he had that aha moment, again for a second time, on his mentorship calls. Now he can take the same technology that allows him to sell an audiobook and use that to create a members-only podcast that attaches to his current membership, delivering that extra value to his students. Take their membership calls on the go with the Castos Stepaway experience. As we wrap up, I know there's a lot of new tech and critical thinking to add to this new channel of content to Jonathan's offerings. How much extra effort is needed in his workflow for an audiobook or a subscription podcast versus just doing his typical public podcast?
So didn't do anything differently in my workflow. However, I will say this audiobook is gonna be more authentic. So my book is already authentic, but I mean, the audiobook is going to be authentic and really conversational. So I'm talking through some things and I'm laughing and I'm like, okay, well, let me get back to the script. One person who did a great job of that when I was listening to his audiobook was David Goggins. So thank you, David Goggins, for really, really giving me the rites of passage to do certain stuff in my audiobook as well. When I read by myself, I read inside my head. I don't read out loud. So reading out loud, just like you said, I mean, sometimes I have to go back and I'm like, okay, let me reread that. Let me redo that part, because it's just, I don't know. There's a little bit of anxiousness, but it's just anxiousness I'm creating on myself, because I'm like, oh, I don't want to mispronounce the word. Don't want to mispronounce the word. Don't want to mispronounce the word. And I mispronounce it. And I'm like, got to do it again, or I'll just roll over it again. So, it's just one of those aspects. I like the free flow, but as I continue going through the workflow as I continue just reading, then things do start to flow smoother. So the people are going to get a real authentic version of me in my truest form in this audiobook.
So what's the next steps? You're going to finish recording the book. Are you going to go into like promotion phase, or are you going to do like, hey, I'm going to send this out to a few beta testers so that they can check it out first? Have you even thought about what the next step is after you finish recording?
I'm glad you just said that. So the beta test I didn't necessarily think about, but now that makes a whole lot of sense. So thank you, Matt. And then after that, I'm gonna do, well, my next episode, I probably can talk about just this process that I'm going through. So just to prepare the people for when I actually do release it. And then I'll be able to really start marketing, really start promoting it in that way. So beta test, do an episode about it, what I'm doing, a little bit behind the scenes, and then also when they can expect it. So yeah, thanks for that, Matt. You just really laid out a strategy.
It's awesome, man. I love the fact that you organically saw the utility of, taking your membership meetings, your coaching calls or mentorship calls, as you call them, and putting them on audio. That's awesome. I'm excited to see you launch the book in audio form. I also love the fact that you're doing it authentically. This is a great update. I appreciate the time out of your busy schedule to meet today and chat about this stuff. Where can folks go to buy this book, or where can they go to sign up to the mailing list so that when the audiobook comes out, they can buy it?
So you can actually go to yourpodcastmentorshow.com, and there you can hop on my mailing list. You can follow my podcasting journey, and that way you'll be in the list, you'll be in the know. When I record the episode talking about what I'm doing, you'll get that, and then you'll be the first to know. You'll be the first to know when we release the audiobook. So yourpodcastmentorshow.com, hop on the email list there, and thank you, Matt.
Hey there, listener, it's Matt. Before you go, I want to offer you, the aspiring podcaster, 2 special items. Number 1, if you haven't started a podcast yet, or you want to find a better podcast hosting company, start here at Castos. Use our coupon code, audience20, that's audience20, when you sign up for a new account at castos.com. Start a podcast like the one you just heard, or about gluten-free muffins, whatever it is, will help you get your podcast out into the world. Number 2, did you know that our academy is free? Enroll today for free at academy.castos.com. Get access to our courses, videos, and templates, all for free. Thanks for listening to the Audience Podcast today. We hope we're helping you become a better podcaster. All that's left for you to do is share this episode on social media. Bye for now.